Okay, so what do we mean by innovative modes? So academia has a lot of infrastructure for incentivizing innovation in content. So by content, I mean arguments, examples, counter arguments, definitions, even content like questions. It's good at content, and it's like you sort of have these ideas, and we can share them, we can emulate them, we can use them, we give prizes for them, we have journals for them, and so on. We're not as good at innovating and incentivizing and discussing, documenting, sharing, emulating modes, innovations in modes. And so even just talking about it, even recognizing it as a thing that we're doing. So what do I mean by modes? So I think it's fairly clear. It's fairly clear what content is. So I think it's like the argument, the counter example, and so on. By mode, I mean things like events, happenings, gatherings. There's this word container, which I will come back to. It's a very important word in the art of gathering. It's kind of a container is roughly speaking an event, but there's a bit more to it than that. There's also modes of recording things. So there's essays, op-eds, blogs, now known as Substacks. There's websites, podcasts, interviews, things like cartoons, videos, like explainers, like break it down for me on YouTube, cheat sheets, handouts. This is kind of different modes. So my edited volume on sexual violence is philosophy essays, but also poetry, philosophical art, sculpture, activities. These are kinds of the sort of how we're getting the ideas out there. And then these interactive engaged opportunities, so things like philosophy games, philosophy apps, ergodic literature. So an ergodic literature is something like a flip book, a choose your own adventure book. Wikipedia is also ergodic literature. It's a resource, like a literature resource, where you yourself have to be doing things actively to sort of change what shape that content is. Of course, in a sense, like all books are, right? Because you decide as a reader, am I going to read the footnotes? Am I going to skip? Am I going to skim read here? But ergodic literature is really the kind of, you think like when you turn the pages of a kid's book, and they're all cut and you cut them separately, and there's like the head of one animal and the body of another and the feet of another. That's ergodic literature. That's like an example of this kind of interactive engagement. And these all really also very much are connected. So some things can be all of them. So at the conference coming up in the next philosophy conference in New Orleans is the PPE, and we're having a Indigenous walking tour. So somebody who's an Indigenous thinker here who does walking tours is going to be giving essentially, it's the politics, philosophy, and economics conference. They're going to be doing a PPE walking tour of New Orleans from the Indigenous perspective, which I think these kinds of conference innovations can also do things like help decolonize academia in this kind of case, and also make it more inclusive. So this could be suit more different people by having these kind of different modes. And I can talk more about inclusivity as well. And again, with my website, there's a lot of content there about how things like moving away from sort of just having the homogeneity of like the 50-minute talk, 50-minute Q&A could suit other people. And easier and things like if you the next day, a lot of these ideas are on my website. You can go there for them. The next day you have a session that is devoted to discussing the previous day's session as a way of being more inclusive to people who think more slowly, for example. So rather than having only the Q&A, the only chance to talk about a talk is right afterwards, like within 50 minutes of the talk ending, there's a second opportunity to help with those more developed thoughts, like thoughts you've had in conversation over dinner or as you're going to sleep that night. But also that's an opportunity for people who maybe think more slowly, for example. So that's the kind of what I mean by mode. So I mentioned containers right at the beginning, which is one of my main interests. A container, if you're in theatre or if you go to hippy dippy holistic retreats, if you're like a yoga teacher in your spare time, you already know the word container. Like people use it in those kinds of art spaces, kind of countercultural community spaces. A container is a set of people in a space at a time, usually with some kind of more or less self-aware, self-conscious, explicit aim, usually educational or some kind of healing art, self-improvement type thing. So something like a trauma retreat, right? It's like a container, but like a lot of things are containers. Yoga classes and container. It depends how much you want to stretch the definition, and I discuss that in my essay on sex witchcraft. Is what do we mean by container? Because you could have it that, I think very naturally classrooms are containers, coaching like physical fitness is sessions are containers. Like, it depends how much you want to stretch the definition, and how then it becomes maybe less useful if every single gathering and meeting is a container. But the art of gathering is thinking of those containers in a really deliberate, conscious way. And then what I'm kind of motivating is how in academia we can develop resources for thinking through them, incentivizing them, documenting those ideas, having other people be able to use them and pick them up and emulate them. And emulation is really important, because not all valuable things can be scaled up. If you have a really intimate conversation with somebody, like a lot of the work I do is on sex. I do orgasm advice stuff, how to enhance orgasms. I have a lot of like intimate conversations with people in sexual violence. I think, wow, it'd be great if like 50 people could have heard that. Like, but that conversation would not have happened if 50 people were listening in or in the room or something. So you can't always scale up, unfortunately. So how then do you make it inclusive? Well, one way is to try to make it easier to emulate, reducing the barriers to emulation by sort of creating infrastructure for describing, recording, sharing, incentivizing, and so on. Part of that, by the way, is norm changes in how much fear people feel, because fear is a big barrier to creativity, often. Both as an innovator, as a conference facilitator, feeling less fear, and as a participant in an event, being less judgmental. So I think where people want to, if people want to innovate in academia, and I certainly hear from a lot of people who do, then there's this real worry that then they're really putting themselves out there, like they're doing something a bit weird and different. And there's this tendency to be very judgmental of community organizers, very negative towards community organizers. So shifting towards norms of being less judgmental, going with the flow more. And that's partly because no event suits everybody. And I can't emphasize this enough. And on my website, I do a lot of pep talks for innovators, potential innovators of conference organizers and so on. No event will suit everybody. And really, really drill down on that, like understand that, because given that, then that's a problem for the homogeneity, because thinking through people that maybe can't focus for 50 minutes anymore, or kind of get really scared when they're presenting a talk, knowing that there's this norm of adversarial, questions are almost always adversarial, and that scares people. Then, this isn't inclusive. But if we have this diversity of modes, that can be more inclusive. So, again, that requires shifts in people being less judgmental of like, well, I didn't like that, that didn't suit me, kind of being less negative about that as a kind of reaction. And so thinking through, I mean, even just within the standard talk Q&A thing, like what kinds of questions are being invited, what kind of questions are happening, how are they being timed, when are they happening? I have I'm having an event soon where actually no objections are allowed. It's a bit of an unusual event coming up. I think that one the description might be on my website. If not, I can put it on there. But no objections are allowed as a kind of piece of experimental event organizing in philosophy. But also, people may be given a task. What kind of task is it? Does it matter if they fail, like fail to do it? Because I think sometimes if you give them a task, and I make all this very clear, I'm very open when I'm doing this container facilitation, we'll do something else as we're failing to do that thing. And I do this in the classroom too. So there's one coming up in November where I'll be having just a lot of Lego, like a lot of Lego. And we'll be using it to create the task is, how will we use this in our own classrooms? So what kind of questions can we give to how do you scaffold a workshop is going to be part of what I'll be teaching. But then what kind of questions can you ask, given what you teach, to help students kind of use Lego to elicit ideas and enhance conversations through things like the power of metaphor, having them do the thing. Now, they might not succeed, but we'll still be doing philosophy together, and maybe hopefully kind of really tapping into that joy of thinking together through this kind of creative activity. And the one thing about Lego is they have this notion of thinkering. Thinkering is like tinkering and thinking, and you merge the words together. Thinkering. So it's like thinking with your hands. And even just, I'll have things like at a philosophy gathering, I'll bring out art supplies and we'll just kind of make art, just like Play-Doh and pipe cleaners and things, often just really silly stuff, because it loosens up the conversation. It could be completely irrelevant, it's still really valuable, but in Lego, it's connected. And I'm a certified Lego facilitator for using Lego to think through ideas. So how is the furniture arrayed in the room? Having, as a facilitator, if people change the furniture, that's really valuable by itself because it's bringing the group together as a kind of community. It's a kind of warm up activity. And it's like what we're doing together is valuable and different enough that it warrants moving the furniture. Like the room is not going to dictate how we act. We're going to dictate what the room is like. It can be really valuable. Um, and there's like, with these tasks, you can get more and more experimental. There's one that I haven't done yet, but I think of it as a kind of experimental philosophy of like going to an art gallery together where people, depending on what the conference is, have to think through what they're seeing as if they didn't have the concept of gender or as if they didn't have the concept of money. And then how would they reinterpret what they're up to? This can be really valuable skill building in philosophy. So if you think like, okay, we're going to go through an art gallery and take out some like folk theories, then that can be a kind of thinking muscle that you build when you're then trying to um, imagine thinking through your abstract philosophy ideas without using your own theory so you can better understand another one, for example. So things like the time of day, using the nighttime to elicit different kinds of ideas, walking together, very valuable activity. So that's the art of gathering, which I think philosophy really needs. Yeah, and I think so. There's this kind of there's a lot of reasons why this is valuable. So one is this importance of this living philosophy. So there's like if you're doing something like an essay, your idea has to be kind of finished. But if what you're doing is like a workshop that you're working through with other people, then other people can be engaging and helping make. So if you have like, here's my theory, does it fit? Like, here's my theory about what happened to me in my life. Does it fit you? People can take it or leave it. But if you have this living philosophy, then people can help make it fit with you. And I can give illustrations of that, but maybe I won't, and I'll wrap up. I can certainly say more, but I will stop there. Thank you so much.